The sound came first, a sharp, snapping crack, then a stunned silence. My daughter's small cry shattered it, her hand clutching her cheek. Blood traced a thin line from the corner of her mouth like a delicate scarlet ribbon. My wife's mother hovered above her, hands trembling, eyes cold as stone. No one dared to move. Forks hovered midair, paused in mid-bite. My wife stared down at her plate, pretending to focus on her meal. Her father cleared his throat and muttered something about manners. I looked at my son. He sat motionless, fists clenched on his lap, his face unreadable. Then he rose quietly. "Grandma," he said, his voice steady and cutting, "should I tell everyone the secret you asked me to keep?" The room froze. My wife's gaze shot up, her mother's face losing all color. For a moment I saw something in my son's eyes. Fear, yes, but also responsibility, a weight no child should ever bear. The air seemed colder, heavier. I didn't breathe. That was the moment everything began to crumble. It wasn't the slap itself that haunted me. It was what my son said afterward. That night, when the house pretended nothing had occurred, I sat beside his bed. His eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears. "She told me not to tell you," he whispered. "Tell me what?" I asked. His voice trembled as he finally spoke. "Mommy cried a lot before you got home last month. She said she helped her fix it." "Fix what?" I pressed. He didn't answer. He turned to the wall, hiding the storm behind his small shoulders. I kissed his forehead and told him to sleep, though I knew I wouldn't. Later, my wife joined me in bed late, smelling faintly of wine and guilt. She slid in silently. When I questioned her about the slap, she offered excuses. Her mother had lost control, it wasn't a big deal, but her voice faltered, cracking under the weight of a rehearsed lie. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the word thick echoing in my mind. I didn't understand it yet, but I knew where to start. The following week, I visited her mother's house under the guise of easing family tensions. She greeted me with a tight smile, her eyes empty, lips controlled like a polished politician. We sat in her living room, soft music playing, her perfume heavy in the air. I asked her about that night, about what she had whispered to my son. She denied everything too quickly. A small tremor in her hands betrayed her as she poured tea. A drop slipped onto her wrist, but she didn't flinch. I noticed a prescription bottle on the counter with my wife's name, dated 2 months before my last business trip. When I inquired, she claimed it was merely to help my wife rest, stressed as she'd been. Rest? Fix? The words rang in my ears. That evening, I checked my wife's phone while she showered. Deleted messages, old conversations. Only a cloud backup remained. A doctor's appointment, a clinic, a receipt. Not for therapy, not for medication, but for a termination. I went there the next day, sitting in my car for an hour before walking in. The nurse recognized the name immediately. "Yes," she said quietly. She came with her mother, everything handled discreetly. The nurse paused. It was early, about 7 weeks. I left without asking whose child it was. I already knew it wasn't mine. That night I cooked dinner. My wife smiled, relieved, believing maybe things had returned to normal. She poured wine and chatted about redecorating the kids' room. When she reached for her glass, I slid an envelope across the table. Her hands shook as she opened it. The clinic's letterhead stared back at her, her mother's signature at the bottom. Tears welled in her eyes. I stayed calm. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. Her lips quivered. I thought you'd leave." "We had another family dinner," I said, voice steady. "Same table, same faces." I paused, then added, "Before dessert, I want to thank my mother-in-law." The room froze. I thanked her for helping hide my wife's pregnancy last fall, for convincing her to erase everything. Forks clattered. My wife buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Her mother tried to speak but could not. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just stared until they could no longer meet my eyes. Then I told the children to grab their coats. We left in silence before anyone could speak. The house is quiet now. My daughter laughs again, my son sleeps peacefully. My wife returned to her mother's, though I don't ask where she is now. Sometimes I sit on the porch, watching streetlights flicker, thinking about how silence can rot a family from the inside, until a small voice finally cracks it open. That voice was my son's. The truth didn't save us, it only stopped the pretending. In the silence that followed, I found peace. Not in forgiveness but in absence. Sometimes the only way to protect what's left of you is to burn what betrayed you.